The HOA president practically tried to swipe my lake 3 days after I moved in. Turned out she didn't realize I owned the docks her whole subdivision relies on. Picture this. I'm standing in my late uncle's cabin, still carrying the scent of funeral lilies and old pine, when a pearl-white SUV crunches up my gravel drive. Out steps a woman in a tennis outfit at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, hugging a folder like it's sacred scripture. "I'm Sabrina Whitmore, HOA president," she declares, thrusting papers into my hands. "This lake is community property. You need to sign over marina operations immediately." The documents felt crisp and official, but something in her frantic eyes screamed bluff. What I didn't yet know was that she was perched on a financial powder keg, and I was the only one who could defuse it, or blow up her entire scheme. What would you do if someone tried to swipe your inheritance right after a funeral? Drop a comment with your worst HOA nightmare and where you're watching from. Let me rewind and show you how I ended up in this fight. 6 months ago, I was Nolan Mercer, 45, divorced electrician from Detroit, living in a studio that smelled like instant ramen and regret. My ex got the house, I got the legal bills, and my future looked about as bright as a burnt-out fuse. Then Great-Uncle Horace died and changed everything. Uncle Horace was the family recluse, 4 decades alone on an incredible lake property in Michigan. Barely spoke to anyone. Kept meticulous journals on everything. The funeral was tiny, just me and a few weathered neighbors trading whispers about him keeping the vultures away. The lawyer's office reeked of old coffee and desperation when he slid the inheritance papers across the desk. 2 acres of prime waterfront, Mr. Mercer. The cabin needs work, but you own 400 feet of Lake Alderwin shoreline, including all underwater rights in that 8-slip marina your uncle ran. I had no clue what underwater rights meant, but those slips were renting for $200 each per month. Do the math, that's $1,600 monthly I just inherited. The place was stunning. Towering pines over a 1960s cabin with solid bones. Crystal water tapping professionally built docks. The scent of fresh lake air mingled with sawdust from Uncle Horace's workshop lingered in every corner. This could be my reset. Then Sabrina Whitmore made her entrance. 3 days after the funeral, 3 days, I'm measuring for new windows when gravel explodes under the tires of that pearl-white SUV. Out strides this woman radiating entitlement like heat off asphalt. Tennis outfit at 10, designer sunglasses, a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Sabrina Whitmore, HOA president," she announces, marching to my door with 2 jumpy board members in tow. "We need to discuss your situation." The way she said situation made my jaw lock. She shoves an official-looking folder at me. Inside, legal pages claiming lake access is a grandfathered community easement and demanding I sign marina operations over to the HOA for $1 annually. "This is how Lakeshore Estates operates," she explains like I'm slow. "We maintain standards, protect property values. We simply cannot allow inappropriate commercial operations disrupting our family community." Her voice dripped with coded phrasing that crawled under my skin. The message was obvious. People like you don't belong here. 48 hours, she continued, adjusting those sunglasses like a weapon. "Sign willingly, or we'll bury you in court." Ask the Hendersons how that played out. "Oh wait, you can't. They sold and moved after we made their lives hell." The threat hung in the air, heavy as humidity. That night, surrounded by Uncle Horace's musty papers and the hush of water tapping the dock, I dove into his journals. What I found made my blood simmer. Page after page logged Sabrina's methodical harassment campaigns. The Kowalski family pushed out after 18 months of frivolous suits. The young Martinez couple driven off by constant violation letters and intimidation. But one entry stopped me cold. Sabrina thinks she's clever, but she doesn't know about the 1999 county easement agreement. $12,000 annual fee required for lake access rights. Haven't seen a payment in years. Whoever inherits this place, that's your nuclear option. Nuclear option? My hands trembled as I searched for more. Another note. The marina sits on my underwater property. Every boat slip, every dock post, every chain and cleat, mine by deed. Let the vultures come. The next owner will have all the ammunition they need. I leaned back in Uncle Horace's creaky chair, tasting the bitter coffee I'd been nursing for hours. This wasn't just about property rights. This was a bully who'd been terrorizing lakefront owners for years, prying away homes through legal warfare and intimidation. She'd picked the wrong target. The damp basement held more secrets, and I knew Uncle Horace had left me everything I'd need to flip the script on Queen Sabrina and her little fiefdom. Time to go hunting. Sabrina didn't wait to declare war. She brought the whole county to my doorstep. The morning after her ultimatum expired, I'm pouring coffee when 3 vehicles crawl up my drive like an invasion. County inspection truck, a sheriff's deputy, and Sabrina's pearl-white SUV bringing up the rear. Diesel fumes mingled with fresh grounds as I watched the parade. Mr. Mercer, Dan Morales, county inspector. Multiple complaints about illegal commercial operations, environmental violations, and unpermitted structures. Behind him, Sabrina stood in that tennis get-up like armor, practically vibrating with glee. The deputy looked bored, but he was there to make sure I cooperated. "I'm sure this is just paperwork confusion," Sabrina cooed. "Once Mr. Mercer understands community standards, I'm confident he'll make appropriate arrangements." But here's the thing about 20 years in construction. You clock intimidation tactics, and you learn to document everything. "Ma'am, I need to conduct this inspection without interference," Morales told her evenly. "County policy." Her smile froze like frost on glass. "Of course, I'll wait in my vehicle." The instant she was out of earshot, Morales' tone shifted. "Your Uncle Horace was solid people," he murmured. "This lady's been filing complaints against you for 3 weeks before you even moved in. That tell you something?" 3 weeks? I'd inherited 4 weeks ago. Morales examined everything with professional thoroughness while I pulled out my phone and hit record. Every dock post, every electrical tie-in, every permit Uncle Horace kept immaculate. 0 violations. The flip of his clipboard pages mixed with the idle thrum of Sabrina's engine. "Listen," Morales said quietly as we walked the shoreline. "I've seen this same pattern twice. Constant complaints, nuisance citations, then suddenly the place sells for cheap. Both times, guess who acquired it through shells?" The pieces clicked together like a clean circuit. That evening, I didn't just read Uncle Horace's files. I photographed every page. The basement cabinet smelled like mothballs and righteous fury. But what I found was a masterclass in receipts. The 1952 original deed was blunt. All riparian rights extending to Lake Centerline, including lake bottom and all structures built thereon. Uncle Horace had underlined the section in red and scrawled a note in the margin. Most folks don't realize waterfront usually includes the lake bottom to the center line unless excluded. That's why lakefront costs more than regular land. Smart man. Every slip, every dock, every chain. Mine by law. But his real genius was in the paper trail. He logged every exchange with the HOA for 40 years. Letters demanding payment for marina use, refusals, legal saber rattling, and his replies. Always polite, always citing the deed, always keeping copies. The next morning brought my counterpunch. I called Dan Morales directly. "Dan, I need to file a few complaints of my own. Trespassing, unauthorized use of private property, and operating commercial ventures without the landowner's permission." "What commercial ventures?" "The HOA's been charging $200 a month for marina slips on my lake bottom for 15 years. Never paid me a dime in rent. That's $144,000 in unpaid lease fees plus trespass damages." Silence, then, "Good Lord, you got documentation?" 40 years worth. That afternoon, the real allies stepped forward. Tom and Betty Harlan knocked on my door, carrying cookies that smelled like victory and looking as nervous as cats. "We heard what Sabrina's doing," Betty said, glancing around like spies. "Same playbook she used on us, but we brought you something." Tom handed me a thick folder. Every violation notice, every legal threat, every dirty trick she'd pulled on them. They'd kept copies before they finally sold. The cookies tasted like chocolate chip justice as I flipped through 17 separate violation notices in 6 months. Grass too long, measured with a ruler. Mailbox the wrong color. Trash cans visible from the street for 37 minutes past pickup. The pages felt worn from handling, like Tom had studied these injustices 100 times. "Cost us 31 grand in legal fees," Tom said bitterly. Her husband Graham suddenly found issues with our mortgage right after we started fighting back. Amazing coincidence. But Betty's next words shifted everything. 3 other families on the lake got the same treatment. The Kowalskis, the young Martinez couple, and the Patels, all sold for 60 to 70% of market value, all to the same shell company. That night, sitting on my dock listening to water lap against posts that were legally mine, I made a decision. This wasn't just about my land anymore. This was about stopping a predator who'd been terrorizing families for years. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a surrender, a declaration of war. The next morning, Sabrina would find certified letters in her mailbox, formal trespass notices for every boat using her marina, demanding $50,000 in back rent, and requiring removal of all vessels within 30 days. Game on, Queen Sabrina. Sabrina's reply to my trespass notices was swift, vicious, and exactly what I expected. Within 48 hours, she called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center. Flyers went to all 47 households, screaming in red letters, "Urgent community health hazard." According to her, my marina posed immediate environmental and safety risks to families and property values. I wasn't invited, of course, but Tom Harlan was, and he called me afterward with the play-by-play. "She's lost her damn mind," he whispered. "Claimed your dock upgrades are leaking chemicals into the lake. Said you're planning to turn the place into some kind of commercial fishing hub that'll bring undesirable elements to the neighborhood." The coded language made my skin crawl, but I wasn't shocked. People like Sabrina always show their true colors when they're cornered. "Gets better," Tom added. "She's hired some hotshot lawyer from Grand Rapids. Guy charges $400 an hour. They're filing an injunction to halt all your construction, claiming it violates environmental protections." $400 an hour. The HOA was burning through member dues like dry tinder, all to steal my property. But Sabrina's real masterstroke came the next morning. I'm replacing rotted dock planks when I hear footsteps. 3 of my slip renters, the Johnsons, the Kowalskis, and an older man named Frank, are walking up my drive looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Nolan," Frank started, his voice strained, "we got letters from the HOA yesterday. If we don't cancel our slip leases with you by Friday, we'll face $500 daily fines for supporting non-compliant commercial operations." The smell of fresh wood stain on my hands mixed with the fear radiating from these decent people. Sabrina was weaponizing their neighbors against them. "She can't legally do that," I said, but Frank shook his head. "Maybe not, but she can make our lives hell trying. The Johnsons already got a violation notice for their garden gnome being aesthetically inconsistent. My mailbox is suddenly the wrong height after 15 years. This was exactly how she'd driven out the Harlans, death by 1,000 paper cuts. That afternoon, I called the maritime attorney Tom had recommended, Patricia Lynn, a specialist in lakefront disputes. Her voice was crisp, professional, and expensive. "Mr. Mercer, I've reviewed the documents you sent. Your riparian rights are ironclad, but there's something else you should know." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I've seen this HOA president's tactics before. Sabrina Whitmore has acquired 4 lakefront properties in the past 8 years using the same harassment campaigns. She creates legal pressure, forces costly court fights, then offers settlement buyouts at 60% of market value." The pattern was crystal clear. "But here's the interesting part," Patricia continued. "I cross-referenced property records with her husband Graham's bank. Lakeshore Bank holds mortgages on 23 of the 47 HOA properties. That's a massive conflict of interest if he's influencing HOA decisions that affect his loan portfolio." Bingo. The fix was in from day one. "There's more," she said, and I heard papers rustling. "Your uncle's marina lease records show consistent $200 monthly payments from HOA members for 15 years. But here's the fascinating part. The HOA's own financial statements show they've been collecting $250 per month from each member for marina maintenance fees. Wait, so they'd been charging members $50 extra and pocketing the difference for 15 years. That's about $36,000 skimmed straight from their own neighbors. The scale of Sabrina's operation was staggering. She wasn't just stealing properties, she was defrauding her entire community. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of playing defense, I went on the offensive. I spent 3 hours writing a detailed letter to every HOA household, exposing the financial fraud, the conflict of interest with Graham's bank, and the harassment pattern. But the real kicker was the last paragraph. Effective immediately, all marina operations will cease until the HOA settles their $144,000 debt for unauthorized use of my lake bottom. All boats must be removed within 30 days or they'll be considered abandoned property subject to disposal. The letter went out certified to all 47 addresses. By Thursday morning, my phone was ringing non-stop, not with angry calls but desperate ones. Half the neighborhood kept their boats at my marina. Without those slips, they had nowhere to dock on the entire lake. But the best call came from Patricia Lynn. "Nolan, I did more digging. That 1999 county agreement your uncle mentioned? I found it. The HOA's lake access easement requires annual payments of $12,000 to the property owner. Guess how many payments they've made?" I was grinning before she finished. 0. They owe you $312,000 in back easement fees. Without that easement, the entire HOA loses lake access. 31 of their 47 homes would lose 40% of their property value overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't the one fighting for survival. Sabrina was. Sabrina's desperation hit like a hurricane. Within hours of my certified letters landing in mailboxes, she was speed dialing city council members, county commissioners, anyone who would listen. Her story? I was an environmental terrorist threatening the lake ecosystem with illegal construction. The first attack came Tuesday morning. I was installing new dock cleats when an official-looking truck pulled up with Environmental Protection Services painted on the side. Out stepped a man with a clipboard and an attitude. "Mr. Mercer, Jim Bailey, contracted by the city to investigate septic system violations. We've had reports of untreated waste entering the lake." My septic system was perfectly functional. Uncle Horace had it pumped and inspected 6 months before he died. Still, I walked Bailey through everything, watching him snap photos and take soil samples like he was solving a crime. "System looks fine to me," he admitted quietly after Sabrina's SUV disappeared around the bend. "But between you and me, I got 3 separate calls this week demanding this inspection. Same woman each time." The harassment was escalating. Wednesday brought a new twist. I was checking mail when my neighbor, Jerry Kowalski, jogged over, looking like a nervous cat. "Nolan, you need to hear what happened at last night's emergency board meeting. Sabrina hired a private investigator, some guy from Detroit, to dig up dirt on your background." My morning coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "What kind of dirt?" "Everything. Your divorce, your finances, your work history. She's looking for anything to paint you as unfit to own lakefront property." Jerry glanced around like he expected someone to be listening. But here's the thing. Half the board is getting sick of her. 2 members already resigned because they're worried about personal liability for these harassment campaigns. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call I'd been dreading. "Mr. Mercer, this is Amanda Bryant from Channel 8 News. We received an anonymous tip about environmental violations at your property. Would you like to comment on allegations that your construction is threatening Lake Alderwin's ecosystem?" Anonymous tip? Yeah, right. But I was ready. "Amanda, I'd love to talk. Not about environmental violations, but about systematic HOA fraud and harassment targeting lakefront owners. I've got 40 years of documentation." The silence stretched long enough for me to hear her interest spike. "Can you be more specific?" I gave her the 30-second version. Fraudulent marina fees, conflicts of interest with Graham's bank, harassment campaigns forcing below-market property sales. By the time I finished, she was scheduling an interview for Friday morning. But Sabrina wasn't done. Thursday brought her nuclear option. I was replacing a section of dock railing when 3 vehicles roared up my driveway like a convoy. County inspector, sheriff's deputy, and, believe it or not, a man in a hazmat suit claiming to be from the state environmental agency. "Sir, we need you to cease all construction immediately," the hazmat man announced, "pending investigation of potential groundwater contamination." The smell of fresh lumber mixed with diesel exhaust and pure bureaucratic nonsense as I watched this circus unfold. Behind them, Sabrina sat in her SUV like a general directing troops. But here's where Uncle Horace's preparation paid off. I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. Their faces, their badge numbers, their claims. Then I called Patricia Lynn on speaker. "Gentlemen, you're talking to my attorney," I announced. "Patricia, they're claiming groundwater contamination from dock construction." Patricia's voice cut through their bluster like a blade. "Officers, what specific contaminants are you testing for? What baseline readings do you have? And who filed the complaint?" Suddenly, nobody wanted to answer. Turns out, Sabrina had filed a complaint claiming I was dumping construction chemicals directly into the lake. Problem was, I'd been using eco-friendly treatments and had receipts for everything. The contamination story was fabricated. The real breakthrough came that evening when Tom Harlan knocked on my door, holding a manila folder that smelled like vindication. "Betty and I have been doing our own digging," he said, grinning. "Remember those other families Sabrina forced out? We contacted them." He spread photos across my kitchen table. Property deeds, sale records, corporate filings showing the same shell company buying every harassed property. The company name? Lakeside Development, LLC. "Guess who's listed as managing member?" Tom asked. I didn't have to guess. Sabrina Whitmore and her husband, Graham, had approved the mortgages for the shell company using inflated appraisals. They'd been running a systematic property theft scheme for 8 years. The scale was breathtaking. Families terrorized into selling, property values manipulated, bank and insurance fraud. This wasn't just harassment. It was organized crime. That night, I sat on my dock listening to water slap against posts that had become the center of a war I never asked for. The moon reflected off the lake like scattered silver coins, and I realized something important. This wasn't just about my property anymore. This was about justice for every family Sabrina had destroyed, every neighbor she'd intimidated, every person too afraid to fight back. Tomorrow, I'd give Channel 8 News enough ammunition to blow up her entire operation. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the calm before the storm. Friday morning changed everything. I was organizing Uncle Horace's papers for the TV interview when I found a manila envelope wedged behind the filing cabinet. One I'd somehow missed. It was sealed and labeled, "For my heir, when the vultures circle," in Uncle Horace's handwriting. Inside was a photocopied agreement dated November 15, 1999, between Horace Mercer and Alderwin County. The header read, "Easement Agreement for Lakefront Development Access." My hands shook as I read. The county had needed lake access to approve the new Lakeside Estates subdivision. Without it, 47 families couldn't build. So, they negotiated an easement with Uncle Horace, granting the HOA permanent lake access rights in exchange for one condition, an annual payment of $12,000 to the property owner. $12,000 every year for 26 years. But here's the kicker. According to the payment schedule, the HOA had made 0 payments since 2017. They owed me 8 years of back fees, $96,000 plus compound interest at 8% annually. Total, $147,000. Uncle Horace had attached a note. They stopped paying when they thought I was too old and sick to fight. Joke's on them. I kept every record. The easement expires automatically if payments lapse for more than 12 months. Without lake access, 31 of their 47 homes lose 40% of their value. That's $2.3 million in property depreciation. Now you see why Sabrina's so desperate. I sat back in Uncle Horace's creaky chair, the magnitude hitting like a sledgehammer. This wasn't about slips or docks. This was about the financial backbone of the entire neighborhood. Without that easement, Sabrina's HOA couldn't legally access the lake. No swimming, no boating, no fishing, nothing. The waterfront homes would become landlocked properties with water views, but no water access. But the real revelation came in Uncle Horace's final note. Check the county recorder's office. Sabrina knows about this agreement. She's known for years. That's why she's trying to force me out. If she can steal my property, she can make the easement disappear forever. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Lynn. "Found something important about your HOA president. Can you meet this afternoon?" I called her immediately. "Patricia, I just found the 1999 easement agreement. The HOA owes me $147,000 in back payments." Silence, then. "Jesus, Nolan, that explains everything." "What do you mean?" "I spent yesterday digging through property records. Sabrina Whitmore didn't just buy those other lakefront properties through shells. She bought them to eliminate potential easement claims. Every property she stole had similar county access agreements. The pattern was now crystal clear. Sabrina wasn't just a petty HOA tyrant. She was running a sophisticated real estate fraud operation, systematically eliminating property owners who could threaten the neighborhood's lake access. "There's more," Patricia continued. "I found the original county planning documents from 1999. The entire Lakeside Estates development was contingent on that easement. Without it, the county never would have approved 47 homes on a landlocked subdivision. So if I revoked the easement, 31 homes would lose their main selling point overnight. Property values would crash, mortgages would go underwater, and Graham's bank would face catastrophic losses on its loan portfolio. No wonder they were desperate. This wasn't about my little dock. This was about millions in property value and a bank portfolio that could implode if the truth came out." I looked out at the lake where Sabrina's neighbors kept their boats, blissfully unaware their HOA president had lied to them for years about the foundation of their community. Uncle Horace had left me more than land. He'd left me a nuclear weapon, and Sabrina had just forced me to use it. The war room smelled like fresh coffee and righteous fury. My kitchen table had become mission control, covered with legal documents, property surveys, and a laptop streaming the Channel 8 interview I'd given that morning. The story was already going viral. HOA president's multi-million-dollar property theft scheme exposed. But I wasn't celebrating. Cornered animals are dangerous, and Sabrina Whitmore was about to get very, very dangerous. Patricia Lynn arrived first carrying a briefcase that looked expensive enough to buy a small car. "Nolan, we need to talk strategy. That easement agreement is your nuclear option, but using it wrong could blow up in your face." Next came Tom and Betty Harlan, followed by Jerry Kowalski and 3 other neighbors I barely knew. Word was spreading fast, and the reasonable folks were choosing sides. "Sabrina's in full panic mode," Jerry reported, setting down a box of donuts that smelled like victory. "She's called another emergency board meeting for tonight. Word is she's going to propose a special assessment, $3,000 per household, to fight you in court. $3,000 per family on top of the legal fees they'd already wasted. Sabrina was literally bankrupting her neighbors to cover up her crimes." Patricia spread papers across the table like a general planning a campaign. "Here's what we're dealing with. Sabrina has 3 possible escape routes, and we need to block all of them." She pointed to the first. "Route 1. Claim the easement agreement is invalid due to some technicality. She's probably hiring experts right now to challenge the county's authority to grant lake access easements back in 1999. "Can she do that?" I asked. "It's possible, but it takes time and money to disprove. Meanwhile, she keeps collecting fraudulent marina fees and pressuring families to sell." Betty leaned forward, her eyes sharp with anger. "What's Route 2? Eminent domain. Convince the county your property is essential for public welfare and force a below-market sale. It's a long shot, but Graham's banking connections could give them leverage." The third option made my blood run cold. "Route 3, Patricia continued, "is the dirtiest. Destroy your credibility. False police reports, planted evidence. Anything to make you look like an unstable troublemaker who shouldn't own lakefront property." Tom nodded grimly. "She tried that with us. Suddenly, we were the problem neighbors who didn't maintain our lawn. Amazing how many violations you can find when you're looking." But Patricia's next words changed the entire landscape. "However, I spent yesterday researching similar cases, and I found something Sabrina doesn't know. There's a federal law, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, that makes it a felony to use systematic harassment campaigns to manipulate property values. We're not just talking civil court anymore. This could mean federal prison." The room went silent except for the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of boats on the lake. "How do we prove systematic harassment?" I asked. Jerry raised his hand like a kid in school. "I've been documenting everything since the Harlans got forced out. Photos, violation notices, meeting minutes where Sabrina talked about maintaining community standards. 3 years of evidence." Betty opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "We contacted the other families she drove out. The Martinezes, the Patels, the Kowalskis who sold in 2019. They all kept records too. Our counterattack was taking shape. Patricia laid out the plan. Phase 1. We hit her with the easement payment demand publicly. Full $147,000, certified mail to every HOA member, so they understand exactly what their president's been hiding. Phase 2, Tom added, we organize the reasonable neighbors. Jerry's already got 15 families willing to sign a petition demanding Sabrina's resignation and a full financial audit. Phase 3 is the media blitz, Patricia continued. That Channel 8 piece was just the beginning. I've got contacts at the Detroit Free Press and a producer at 60 Minutes who specializes in real estate fraud. But the masterstroke came from an unexpected voice. Rebecca Marsh, the local elementary school teacher who lived 3 houses down, had been quietly listening from the corner. What if we use her own tactics against her? She suggested. Sabrina's been using HOA meetings to intimidate people for years. What if we pack the next one with supporters and demand answers about the missing easement payments? The brilliance was obvious. Instead of fighting her in court, where she had resources, we'd confront her in the community center, where every lie would be witnessed by the neighbors she'd defrauded. The annual HOA meeting is scheduled for next Saturday, Jerry said, checking his phone. All 47 households get a vote on leadership and budget matters. Patricia grinned like a shark smelling blood. Perfect. By then we'll have filed federal complaints, delivered payment demands, and given every neighbor a chance to see how much money Sabrina's schemes have cost them. I looked around the table at these people who had become my allies in a battle I never asked for. Tomorrow, we'd start dismantling Sabrina's empire, one document at a time. But tonight, we savored planning her downfall. Sabrina's response was swift, vicious, and completely illegal. Sunday night, I was reviewing legal documents when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery outside. Through my window, I saw a construction truck dumping a pile of concrete debris and rusted rebar at the edge of my shoreline. Close enough to look like mine, far enough to technically be on county land. By Monday morning, spray paint reading "Community Property" covered 3 sections of my dock in dripping red letters. The smell of fresh paint mixed with lake water and my rising rage as I documented everything with my phone. But Sabrina's masterstroke came Tuesday afternoon. I was pressure washing the vandalism when Sheriff Deputy Martinez pulled into my driveway, looking uncomfortable. Behind him, Sabrina's SUV sat like a vulture. Mr. Mercer, I hate to do this, but I've got 3 separate reports filed yesterday claiming you threatened HOA board members with physical violence. My pressure washer hissed to a stop. 3 reports? Mrs. Whitmore, board member Graham Hutchins, and... He checked his notepad. Someone named Patricia Kowalski claim you showed up at her house Saturday night making terroristic threats about what happens to people who cross you. The absurdity was staggering. Deputy, I was at my attorney's office Saturday night until 9, then home watching Netflix. I've got receipts and streaming history to prove it. Martinez nodded. I figured, but I still have to file the report. Maybe install some security cameras for your own protection. The message was clear. Sabrina was escalating to fabricated criminal charges. That evening, Patricia Lynn called with news that spiked my blood pressure. Nolan, I got a tip from someone at the county inspector's office. Sabrina tried to bribe Jim Bailey, offered him $2,000 cash to find violations on your property. Please tell me he recorded it. Better. He reported it to his supervisor and filed a formal complaint. But here's the scary part. She also approached the septic inspector, the electrical inspector, and someone from the fire marshal's office. She's trying to buy violations. The corruption was staggering, but it was more ammunition. Wednesday brought a new horror. Tom Harlan called at 6 a.m., voice shaking with rage. Nolan, they got into our mailbox last night, stole 3 weeks of mail, including our social security checks and Betty's medical forms. Found our stuff scattered in a ditch near Sabrina's house. Mail theft. Federal crime. She was getting desperate enough to risk prison. But the real attack came Thursday morning when my phone rang with a call I dreaded. Mr. Mercer, this is Sandra Willis from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. We've received reports that your construction has disturbed protected wildlife nesting areas. We need to inspect immediately. I grabbed my documentation folder and met her at the dock. Sandra was professional, thorough, and clearly annoyed at having her time wasted. After 2 hours of inspection, soil samples, and photos, she delivered her verdict. Mr. Mercer, your improvements are actually beneficial to lake ecology. Whoever filed this complaint either doesn't understand environmental science or is deliberately wasting state resources. As she packed up, Sandra lowered her voice. Off the record, I've gotten 4 complaints about your property in 2 weeks. Same person each time. Increasingly hysterical claims. Someone's trying very hard to create problems where none exist. That afternoon, Jerry jogged over with news that changed everything. Emergency HOA board meeting last night, he reported, still out of breath. Sabrina proposed hiring private security to patrol community boundaries and document violations. Translation: she wanted to pay people to spy on me 24/7. The paranoia was spiraling. But here's the good news, Jerry continued. 3 more board members resigned. They're scared about personal liability for harassment lawsuits. The board's down to Sabrina, her husband Graham, and one other guy who owes Graham's bank about 50 grand. Her empire was crumbling from within. Friday brought the counterstrike. I spent the morning installing a professional security system. 8 cameras covering every angle, motion sensors, and cloud backup streaming directly to Patricia's office. But the real victory came when Rebecca Marsh knocked on my door holding a manila folder and grinning. Nolan, you're not going to believe this. I teach Graham's daughter Emma in my 4th grade class. Yesterday, Emma asked why her dad's so worried about the lake man and mentioned hearing her parents argue about money they owe and what happens if people find out. Kids hear everything. And remember what adults forget. Emma also said her mom, Sabrina, has been making secret phone calls about selling their house and moving before everything falls apart. The rats were preparing to abandon ship. That night, sitting on my dock with new security cameras humming quietly, I realized Sabrina had made a fatal mistake. Every illegal act, every fabricated complaint, every desperate smear attempt was being documented by multiple sources. She thought she was destroying me. Instead, she was building the federal case that would destroy her. Sabrina's final week of freedom was a masterclass in criminal desperation. Monday morning, I woke to find my driveway blocked by a truck labeled Lakeside Property Management Services. 2 men in polos were measuring my shoreline and snapping photos like they owned the place. "Excuse me," I called out. "This is private property." The bigger guy barely glanced up. "Court order, buddy. HOA hired us to assess community assets for potential receivership." "Court order?" "Yeah, right." I checked. No such filing existed, but these clowns didn't know I'd been documenting everything. By Tuesday, Sabrina escalated to document forgery. Patricia Lynn called, her voice tight with fury. "Nolan, she filed a marina lease renewal with the county clerk's office. Claims you signed a 99-year agreement transferring all lake access rights to the HOA for $1 a year. The audacity was breathtaking. Please tell me they didn't accept it." "Oh, they did. Until I had a handwriting expert examine the signature. It's laughable. She didn't even get the capital letters right." Document forgery. Federal felony, 5 years minimum. Wednesday brought the bribery attempt. Judge Morrison's campaign fund mysteriously received a $5,000 donation from concerned lakeside citizens. The same day, Sabrina filed motions challenging the easement agreement. Problem: the donation check was signed by Graham Whitmore using the HOA's community fund account. Campaign finance violation, misuse of HOA funds, attempted judicial bribery. She was collecting felonies like Pokemon cards. Thursday morning delivered the environmental terrorism hoax. I was sipping coffee when Patricia called, barely containing her laughter. "You're not going to believe this. Sabrina organized a fake environmental protest outside the county office building. Hired about 15 people from a temp agency to hold signs claiming you're poisoning the lake. Did it work? Oh, it worked beautifully, for us. Channel 8 interviewed the protesters. Half admitted on camera they were paid $50 each and had no idea what they were protesting. The rest couldn't even pronounce environmental." The desperation was turning comedic. But Friday brought news that stopped me cold. Rebecca Marsh called at dawn, her teacher's voice sharp with concern. "Nolan, Emma Whitmore didn't come to school yesterday. When I called the house, Sabrina claimed they'd gone to visit grandparents, but Emma's grandmother lives 2 streets over and hasn't seen them. They were running." Within an hour, Tom Harlan confirmed it. Saw them loading suitcases into Graham's car at 5 a.m. big ones, like they're planning a long trip. They were fleeing before the federal investigation could catch up. That afternoon, I got the call that changed everything. Mr. Mercer, this is Special Agent Lisa Bennett with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We've been monitoring the situation in your neighborhood for several weeks. Your attorney provided substantial documentation of systematic real estate fraud, and we're ready to move forward. Move forward how? Arrests, search warrants, asset seizure. Mrs. Whitmore has been running a racketeering operation that crosses state lines. We've identified similar schemes in Ohio and Indiana. This isn't just local HOA corruption anymore. The scale was staggering. Sabrina hadn't just been stealing lakefront properties. She'd been running a multi-state real estate fraud ring. We need you to attend Saturday's HOA meeting as planned, Agent Bennett continued. Let her think she's safe while we execute warrants. Can you handle that? Saturday morning dawned gray and misty, rain-scented air hanging over the lake. The community center parking lot was packed. 47 households, reporters, supporters, and what looked like half the sheriff's department in unmarked cars. Inside, Sabrina sat at the head table wearing a navy blazer like armor. Her fake smile was stretched so tight it looked painful. Graham hunched beside her, constantly checking his phone as if expecting bad news. The meeting started normally, budget reports, landscaping proposals, the usual HOA bureaucracy, but tension built like steam in a boiler. Then Rebecca Marsh stood. I'd like to ask about the $147,000 in unpaid easement fees the HOA owes Mr. Mercer for lake access rights. The room went dead silent. Sabrina's smile flickered. I'm not sure what you're referring to, she said carefully. Tom Harlan stood next. I'm referring to the 1999 county agreement requiring annual payments of $12,000 for community lake access. The agreement we haven't paid since 2017. More neighbors rose. Jerry Kowalski, Betty Harlan, 15 families now, aware that their president had lied about the foundation of their community. Sabrina's facade cracked. This is a coordinated attack by outside agitators trying to destroy our property values. That's when Agent Bennett walked through the back door, badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. Mrs. Sabrina Whitmore, you're under arrest for racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The handcuffs clicked with the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The community center erupted like a powder keg. Sabrina's face went white as Agent Bennett approached the head table, 3 more agents behind her and sheriff's deputies sealing the exits. This is ridiculous, Sabrina screamed, jumping up so fast her chair toppled. I demand to speak to my attorney. You'll have that opportunity, Bennett replied calmly, pulling out handcuffs that gleamed like silver justice. Sabrina Whitmore, you're under arrest for racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, document forgery, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The room buzzed with shocked whispers and the electric hum of phone cameras capturing every moment. Graham tried to slip toward a side exit, but Deputy Martinez was already there. Graham Whitmore, you're under arrest for bank fraud, conspiracy, and violation of the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. Channel 8 was broadcasting live, cameras scrambling for the perfect shot as the cuffs snapped around Sabrina's wrists. This is a setup, she screamed as Bennett read her rights. He's the criminal. He threatened us. He's trying to steal our lake. But I was ready. Rising slowly, I pulled out the manila folder that had sat on my lap all meeting. Actually, Sabrina, I said, my voice carrying over the stunned room, let's talk about who's been stealing what. I walked to the front. Ladies and gentlemen, your HOA president has been lying to you for 8 years about the most basic legal requirement for your lake access. I held up the 1999 easement agreement. This document, signed by the county and my uncle, requires annual payments of $12,000 for community lake access. Without these payments, 31 of your homes lose water access entirely. The crowd stirred uneasily. Jerry Kowalski raised a hand. How much do we owe? Including compound interest, $147,000. But that's not the worst part. I held up the property records Tom Harlan had compiled. Your president has systematically targeted lakefront owners, using harassment campaigns to force below-market sales. 4 families driven out, properties bought through shell companies for 60% of market value. Murmurs turned to outrage as neighbors connected the dots. But I wasn't done. She's also been stealing from you directly. The HOA has charged each of you $250 monthly for marina maintenance while paying my uncle only $200. That's $50 per household per month for 15 years. About $36,000 stolen from your own community funds. The room exploded. Voices overlapped in anger. She stole from us. My marina fees paid for her schemes. How much of our money is gone? Sabrina struggled against the cuffs, her face twisted with rage. You don't understand. He's an outsider. He doesn't belong here. We were protecting the community. Protecting it from what? Rebecca Marsh stood, her teacher's voice slicing through the chaos. From having a neighbor who legally owns his property? Tom Harlan rose next, his weathered face hard with anger. You drove us out with lies and harassment. $31,000 in legal fees because you wanted our lakefront. More voices joined in. Betty describing 17 violation notices in 6 months. Jerry detailing constant intimidation. 3 neighbors admitting they'd considered selling just to escape the harassment. Agent Bennett stepped forward, holding up evidence bags. Mrs. Whitmore attempted to bribe county inspectors, forged property agreements, organized mail theft, and filed false police reports. We have recordings, photographs, and witness testimony documenting systematic criminal activity spanning multiple states. The media frenzy was in full swing, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, social media exploding with hashtags like #HOA scandal and #lake fraud exposed. But the most satisfying moment came when I addressed the community directly. Despite everything your president has done, I'm prepared to offer a reasonable settlement. I'll forgive the $147,000 in back easement payments in exchange for a $50,000 payment plan over 5 years to fund marina improvements and lake restoration. Relief rippled through the room. Furthermore, I'll maintain community lake access at fair user fees, establish a resident-controlled marina management committee, and ensure transparent operations going forward. Spontaneous applause broke out as neighbors realized their nightmare was over. As FBI agents escorted Sabrina and Graham toward the exit, she turned back one final time, her voice breaking. This isn't over. My lawyers will destroy you. But Bennett's response was the perfect mic drop. Ma'am, you're facing 37 federal charges. Your lawyers are going to be very busy. The community center doors slammed behind them with the finality of a prison cell. Justice served, lakefront style. 6 months later, the smell of barbecue smoke and fresh pine drifted across Lake Alderwin as 300 people celebrated the first annual Lake Freedom Festival. Sabrina Whitmore was serving 18 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to 14 counts of fraud and racketeering. Graham lost his banking license and got 2 years for his role in the conspiracy. The FBI seized $340,000 in fraudulent proceeds, plus their house, cars, and boat, sold at auction to compensate victims. But revenge was never the point. Justice was. The transformation was breathtaking. The new HOA board, elected unanimously after Sabrina's arrest, had slashed annual dues by 45% through transparent budgeting. Property values soared 18% once buyers learned about guaranteed lake access and honest management. The fraudulent marina fees were gone, replaced by actual maintenance you could see. Nolan, you need to see this, Rebecca Marsh said, jogging over with a bright teacher's smile. We'd been dating for 4 months. Turns out, fighting corruption together builds one hell of a foundation. She handed me a thick envelope. Inside was notification that our environmental restoration project had won a $25,000 state grant for invasive species removal and native plant restoration. The Horace Mercer Lake Conservation Initiative would transform 200 acres of damaged shoreline into pristine habitat for fish, birds, and future generations. Tom and Betty Harlan approached carrying plates of pulled pork that smelled like community and second chances. They'd become the unofficial neighborhood grandparents, hosting weekly coffee sessions where people actually talked instead of filing violation complaints. 42 kids signed up for the sailing program, Betty announced proudly. Emma Whitmore was first on the list. Emma had stayed with her grandmother after her parents' arrests. The kid was thriving without constant toxic stress, becoming one of Rebecca's star students. Sometimes Justice looks like a 10-year-old learning to sail on water her parents tried to steal. The Marina Cooperative was generating $3,200 a month in slip fees, funding playground equipment, road repairs, and a new beach accessible to disabled residents. Uncle Horace would have loved seeing his old boat slips serving the whole community instead of lining corrupt pockets. Jerry Kowalski bounded over with news that made everything sweeter. Patricia just called. That documentary about our story won a regional Emmy, and she's launching a national nonprofit legal clinic for HOA abuse victims. They're calling it the Lake Alderwin model. The media attention had been intense, but ultimately healing. My phone rang weekly with calls from property owners facing similar harassment. Patricia's clinic had already helped 17 families fight back against corrupt HOAs in 6 states. The ripple effects kept spreading. The Michigan legislature passed the Property Rights Protection Act, requiring full disclosure of easement agreements and establishing criminal penalties for systematic harassment. Ohio, Wisconsin, and Indiana were drafting similar laws. Uncle Horace's quiet resistance had become a national movement. But the moment that mattered most came when the original Kowalski family returned for the festival. They'd bought a cabin across the lake, close enough to rejoin the community they'd been terrorized into abandoning. "You didn't just save your property," Mr. Kowalski told me, voice thick with emotion. "You saved the idea that regular people can fight back and win." As twilight painted the lake in gold and crimson, I stood on the dock where this war began. The wood felt smooth under my feet, worn by countless neighbors who no longer feared enjoying their own community. Children's laughter echoed across water that sparkled with reflected stars and endless possibility. The Horace Mercer Environmental Scholarship would award $5,000 annually to local students studying conservation or environmental law. The first recipient was Emma Whitmore, proof that even the children of bullies deserve a chance to build something better. Uncle Horace's journals taught me that protecting good people sometimes means stopping bad ones. But the real lesson was simpler. Communities heal when neighbors choose courage over fear, truth over convenience, and justice over the easy path. As stars emerged over Lake Alderwin, reflecting like scattered diamonds on water that finally belonged to everyone, one thing was clear. Stories like this prove that ordinary people can defeat corrupt systems when they stand together. If you've got your own HOA nightmare to share, drop it in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. And if you loved seeing justice served lakefront style, subscribe to HOA Stories and hit that notification bell for more tales of neighbors fighting back and winning. Because sometimes the good guys really do win.